Greetings, everybody. My name is Rick Murray. I'm the Deputy Director and Vice President for Research at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And I'm delighted to welcome people here today for this session of CHOW. We're here at CHOW, of course, because we all know how important it is to understand the ocean. And we also appreciate the importance of ocean observations, monitoring, and modeling to building that knowledge. As I'm sure everybody's aware, what's particularly interesting these days is there's growing interest beyond our community in how knowledge about the ocean can support the development of solutions that address some of society's greatest challenges. In addition to climate, plastics, fishing, you name it, there are serious, significant challenges that society is facing, and that the ocean plays a significant role in being part of the solution space. And with that growing interest, comes rapidly increasing demand for data and models to evaluate the effectiveness of climate policies and to refine our forecasting abilities. All of this requires better, more pervasive ocean and coastal observations, which translate into the newest commodity, namely data. So as Peter Domenical, President and Director of WHOI, mentioned in his remarks earlier at CHOW, at COP27, WHOI, Scripps, and 20 other like-minded partner organizations organized the first ever ocean-focused pavilion inside the conference's Blue Zone, where we heard a repeated refrain from many of the visitors. What is happening to the ocean, and what does it mean for us? So the panel we've assembled today, many of whom attended COP27, will address all of this and more. And I'd like to now turn things over to our moderator from NOAA, Nicole LeBoeuf, to lead this conversation. Nicole is the Assistant Administrator for NOAA's National Ocean Service and is uniquely qualified to head up this panel discussion today. At the National Ocean Service, she oversees many strategic and operational aspects of America's premier coastal and ocean agency. Nicole has over 20 years of scientific and program management experience and specializes on the connections between science and policy, which is one of the reasons why she's a perfect person to tackle this question of improving our observation capabilities, which are after all, our eyes on and our eyes in the ocean and coast. So thank you, Nicole, and I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, welcome to everybody today. Nicole?
Thank you, Rick. Hello, everyone. I am Nicole LeBoeuf, and I am honored to be with you today and to be joined by Dr. Katy Croft Bell, Dr. Jim Edson, and Dr. Emmanuel Di Lorenzo. Many thanks to Rick Murray and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution for hosting today's event, for inviting me to moderate, and for giving us an opportunity to discuss data needs to support the ocean climate nexus. We all know that meeting the challenges presented to the ocean by climate change requires vastly expanded, more sophisticated and accessible observation systems. This new era of ocean observing brings new challenges as well as important opportunities that we must collectively meet with ambitious goals and ambitious science. As the leader of the National Ocean Service, I oversee the work of the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System Program Office. So of course, I am very interested in how ocean science and technology can help us better understand and get ahead of rapid changes in the ocean and along our coast. These are changes already impacting our daily lives. I don't believe it's an exaggeration to say that the people listening to this talk today and to this panel and at this conference have a real opportunity to impact much about humanity's future. That's because we can spur innovation and ocean-based solutions, transforming our relationship with 70% of the planet for the better. I'm excited because I believe that increasing our comprehension of current and future ocean and coastal conditions can hold the key not only to a more prosperous future, but to more sustainable use of our marine environment. The search for solutions to climate change, fisheries management, coral reef decline, coastal resilience, and many other challenges may very well hinge on actionable information that lies at the intersection between the ocean, climate, and human systems. I believe that the search for many of society's climate solutions will rely upon ocean and coastal observations, making up 70% of the planet. How could it not? This includes data to drive modeling of future conditions and to elevate our progress toward agreed upon goals and objectives, such as those in the White House's Ocean Climate Action Plan. We at NOAA are elevating the importance of collecting and applying ocean and coastal data in new and innovative ways, and by promoting ocean and blue tech clusters, accelerators, and other convening mechanisms that defy labels but serve to incubate and catalyze and speed our work along. For example, just this week, NOAA announced $100 million in Inflation Reduction Act funding to support a new competitive business accelerator program and existing funding opportunities to fulfill critical unmet market needs. With these investments, we aim to help businesses navigate commercialization pathways related to NOAA's mission and to help communities prepare for and adapt to and build resilience to climate change. With ocean and coastal data at their core, NOAA's climate resilience accelerators will support the delivery of coastal and ocean-based resilience products and services designed to help communities prepare for and build resilience. This is just one way that NOAA is supporting entrepreneurs and startups with training, resources, and funding to bring ocean-based climate resilient solutions to the market. I just wanted to mention that from the top because we will be releasing a notice of funding opportunity early this summer, so stay tuned. For today's discussion, we have assembled an excellent panel to address these ideas and more. I'm really excited to hear from our guests and to encourage active participation in our discussion. We will be taking your questions after all of our speakers have introduced themselves. So when it's time, please submit your questions via the chat directly to our host and co-hosts. First, we will hear from Katy Croft Bell, who is the founder and president of the Ocean Discovery League and a National Geographic Fellow. Next, we will be joined by Jim Edson. He is a senior scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and the chief scientist of the Ocean Observatories Initiative. And finally, we will hear from Emmanuel, or Manu, DiLorenzo, a professor at Brown University and a chairman and co-founder of Ocean Visions. After that, we will have time for what I hope will be a rich discussion. So with that, let's turn it over to our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Katy, and then Jim, and then Manu.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Katy Croft Bell, and I'm the founder and president of the Ocean Discovery League. My background is in deep sea exploration and research, which I have been involved with for more than 20 years. And over that time, I've heard so many people say we've explored 1% or 10% or even 15% of the deep sea, but without any information to back up those statistics. So I've been working on the math, and based on my calculations over the last 50 years or so, we've actually visually explored about 0.001% of the seafloor. It's about the same area as the state of Rhode Island. And at that rate, with the current tools that we have, it'll take hundreds to thousands of years and about $1 quadrillion to see the entire seafloor one time. So why is that? Well, first, the current tools are insufficient for the task at hand. We need to invest in lower cost and far more efficient technologies to explore the deep sea, just so that we can get a baseline of what's there, so we can start to understand why and how we should responsibly interact with the ocean, due to so many of the issues that Nicole and Rick have introduced the panel with. In addition, most researchers around the world don't have access to the necessary tools for deep sea work. So research and conservation agendas are driven by the wealthiest countries, organizations, and individuals who do have the fortunate resources to have access to them. So I founded the Ocean Discovery League about 2 years ago for this very reason, to accelerate deep ocean exploration by developing accessible systems and broadening the community of those who explore and understand the deep seafloor. So to achieve our vision of an explored, thriving ocean, my team is working on 3 areas. First, developing low-cost, easy-to-use systems for deep sea exploration and research to reduce the barriers to access of deep sea data collection, so just to gather the data. Second, making deep sea observation data more accessible so that we can both use it to undertake a strategic global exploration campaign and develop AI-driven tools for more efficient and accurate data analysis. And third, increasing capacity worldwide with a focus on communities that have been historically excluded from deep sea exploration and research. By reducing the barriers and increasing access to the deep sea will not only increase the size and diversity of the team required to do the job, but also accelerate ocean discovery and understanding of our ocean, which, as we all know, is absolutely critical for our continued survival on Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Katy. Jim.
All right, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jim Edson. I'm a senior scientist at Woods Hole. But unlike most of my colleagues at Woods Hole, I'm actually a marine meteorologist who studies the weather over the ocean. And my research focus is on the exchange of energy between the ocean and the atmosphere that drives this atmospheric engine and the resulting winds that drive waves and currents. And so the goal of what this which we call air-sea interaction research, is to improve weather forecasts, marine weather forecasts in particular. So pretty easy to justify what I do. I don't always get funded to do it. So I've been involved in observatory science since, I love saying this, the turn of the century. And so for about the past 25 years. I started when I oversaw construction of the Martha's Vineyard Coastal Observatory and its air-sea interaction tower, which is south of Martha's Vineyard in the Atlantic Ocean. So that began my 25 years of observatory science. I'm currently leading the operation and maintenance of the National Science Foundation's Ocean Observatory Initiative, or OOI. So the OOI maintains a global array of sophisticated instrumentation in demanding locations. This includes 800 sensors on 80 platforms, and it represents a collaboration between Woods Hole, Hui, Oregon State University, and the University of Washington. So these measurements, they span the deep ocean that Katy just talked about, so the seafloor to the lower atmosphere, and include measurement arrays in the Irminger Sea, the Gulf of Alaska, along the east and west coasts, and a cabled array on the ocean floor that is currently observing an active volcano. So the OOI is part of what I consider a new paradigm of ocean observing that relies less on ships and ship surveys and more on long-term observations, autonomous vehicles like gliders, profilers, AUVs, and drones, as well as satellites. The OOI itself is expected to have a lifetime of 30 years so that we can truly have a climate record for climate studies. We are currently 8 years into those 30, so we have ways to go, but there's plenty to be learned from the record that we've already collected. Importantly, our data is freely available in near real time over the internet through a number of access points that include our Data Explorer, which is a graphical interface and data delivery system. And our goal, and we'll talk about this more, is to democratize the data and allow everyone the opportunity to improve our understanding of the oceans using OOI data. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Manu.
Well, thank you. Again, my name is Emanuele Di Lorenzo. I'm a professor of ocean and climate sciences at Brown University, and also chairman and co-founder of Ocean Vision, which is a nonprofit that aims at catalyzing solutions for ocean and climate restoration. Ocean Visions brings together a network of research institutions, startups, NGOs, or venture funds, and other stakeholders to design and pilot strategies or technologies to understand and advance ocean-based solutions to climate change. So with that said, I'm here today to share a few thoughts on the next generation of observing systems. And I would like to start off by saying that the next generation of observing systems will necessarily need to enable more transdisciplinary research and discovery, but also inform the development of solutions to the growing threats that the ocean is facing due to climate change and other human disruption. As you all know in this audience, climate change has an extensive impacts on the structure and function of the oceanic ecosystems, affecting not only its physical aspects, but more importantly, its chemistry, the biology, and life in the ocean. So these changes can significantly influence the human capacities to depend on the ocean for sustenance and well-being. However, our understanding of the ocean's vital chemical and biological science remains very limited. So in this slide, for example, observing networks like the biogeochemical Argo, or even the Woods Hole recent proposal for the ocean vital sign networks, present a significant innovation and also opportunity. Still, it's crucial that these new observational networks are smart, adaptive, cost-effective, and most importantly, able to adjust in real time to the evolving needs of the end users. They must be responsive, for example, to the needs of developing and implementing solution strategies that can potentially mitigate or even reverse the adverse effect of climate change and other human activities. Now, these solutions that I'm thinking about include harnessing the ocean's natural pathways to remove carbon dioxide, often referred as CDR. Methods include, for example, macroalgae cultivation, artificial upwelling, or ocean alkalization, as also outlined in the 2022 National Academy of Science report on this matter. However, the reality is that we lack the data foundation to assess the impacts, the feasibility, the effectiveness of these strategies on a large scale. And it's for this reason that we really need these smart observing platforms and networks that are really critical for us to inform. Now, the ocean CDR will become an important component of perhaps the world portfolio and our strategies to combat climate change. And so these efforts, like the proposed Ocean Vital Sign Network from WHOI, will be of paramount importance also for properly monitoring, reporting, and verifying these ocean CDR strategies. However, the design of these development and these observational systems should be a collaborative effort that involve a diverse, multi-sector community. And this community should not only consist of researchers, but also innovators, NGOs, intergovernmental organizations, and other stakeholders. Now, an example of such co-design networks that are already evident are actually in the coastal areas where community-driven research has initiated the development, for example, of hyperlocal smart environmental sensing networks, things like, for example, measuring water level or air qualities. And these sensors measure coastal processes at the scales that are relevant to the local residents, providing them essential data for planning resilience, and most importantly, for shaping the climate futures of coastal cities and communities. So in summary, the next generation of observing systems might have both focus on discovery and understanding of the ocean, but also enable the development and sustainability of ocean solutions. And for this to happen, they must be co-designed by these multi-sector communities with end users and also end uses in mind. And with this, I would like to end my remark and give the word back to Nicole. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you to all three of our panelists. And let's get into discussion. So I've got a question I'll kick us off with. And I'm going to look to Katy and Manu first, but of course, Jim, you can answer as well if you like. The question is, what innovations are necessary in modeling or sensor design to support and take advantage of these new generation smart observing platforms, sort of that low cost, easily produced platforms that we're seeing today? Katy, you want to get us started on that one?
Sure, absolutely. I'll leave the modeling to Manu, but can certainly speak to the low-cost data collection tools. This is an area where we've been doing a lot of work and have been doing a lot of interviews with people around the world, trying to gather, what are the things that will reduce the barriers to these things. So cost obviously is one of them. And one really important thing that we heard several times was your low cost is different from my low cost. So like, even if a vehicle costs $100,000, which is way less than, an Alvin or a Jason, it's still cost prohibitive in many places. So we need to drop that cost significantly to like the thousands, hundreds, or thousands of dollars range to make these kinds of tools at least affordable for people in many places around the world. And another thing is the ease of use. So you shouldn't have to have a PhD to operate a vehicle. You shouldn't have to have 30 years of experience. You know, there are so many easy to use electronics nowadays. Your laptops are so much easier to use than they were 30 years ago. You've got a phone in your pocket. This is like basically a supercomputer now. So making sure that the interfaces are easy to use, it's easy to deploy. You may not necessarily have a ship that has a winch and an A-frame. So what are the like deployment scenarios that might be available in a certain place, and ensuring that you're creating things with people to ensure that they meet their needs. So cost, yes, of course, is a big consideration, but also ensuring that the deployment strategies, the way that you're able to do things, the way that you're able to program them, you shouldn't have to do command line. It should be super intuitive to be able to use these kinds of things. So these are all the kind of considerations that we've been working on over the last couple of years, and are continuing to gather, like, what are these requirements so that we can start to design a system, or, you know, a building system, really not necessarily a one vehicle, so that people are able to actually explore the areas of the ocean that they want and need to explore to be able to understand their, you know, ocean environments.
Those are great points. I had never thought of how easy some technology has become. And how
Yeah, I
others
mean,
are
you use
just
it every
not.
day, so it's like
Use it every day.
supernatural now, but
Yeah.
still, like, so many vehicles, you know, the one guy
Right.
wrote the one NSF proposal and he designed the whole thing and is the only person that can fix it. But that shouldn't have to be the case. Things need to be repairable in countries, in places where you didn't necessarily design and build the thing, because shipping can be cost prohibitive, customs, like there's so many things that, like, you shouldn't have to rely on people in the US or in Europe or in the places that historically have the resources to do these things. You should be able to repair it in country. You should be able to, like, continue to be able to use things without necessarily flying somebody out or shipping the thing back or whatever the case may be.
That's a great point. Mano, did you want to contribute to that as well?
Sure. You know, I'll address the modeling part of the question. I think, you know, similar to what I was mentioning in terms of the observational platform, really focused also on the solution enabling, you know, aspects. The modeling, especially climate models that are, for example, modeling the carbon cycle, will have to be sort of thought through in a way that they're also more geared towards enabling the development and deployment of solutions, including, for example, if we are to do some strategies of ocean carbon dioxide removal in the ocean, we will probably have to understand the impacts, you know, the effectiveness of those. And so the observing platforms alone will not allow us to do that. So we need a modeling that is really integrated and has that focus. And so that's one component that I will say. The other thing that I can mention is the fact that, of course, we all have heard this revolution of artificial intelligence, and probably some of the dynamics that we cannot resolve with equations right now in the models, and especially when we talk about petrochemical cycles, could really be informed by this new era of modeling that is really artificially intelligence-based. And I just recently heard, for example, that even ECMWF and their forecasting system are migrating from traditional numerical modeling, numerical weather prediction, to actually artificial intelligence-based predictions. And they actually seem to do better than the numerical models. So with that said, I think that those are my two remarks, you know, explore new approaches, but also be focused on using models to enable solutions as well, not just traditional research.
Oh, so thank you both so much for that, and that thought-provoking comment about making them better than numerical weather models. Really interesting. So I have another question for the panel, and as I ask that and they begin to answer, please put your questions in the chat box so we can continue the discussion. So the next question, and maybe Jim, you can take this one. We're already hearing a bit of this theme here. I'd like to expand on the accessibility and the democratization of ocean science. What does this mean to you, and how do you think we need to get there?
Yeah, so for me, it's the ability for everyone, right, to easily observe and study the ocean, no matter if you're in Iowa or on Cape Cod. And that's for researchers, educators, and the general public are all included in that. And I think the keys to that is making the data more accessible, or ever more accessible, But in my mind, it also means making the data free of charge so that anyone could afford to use it. I know we may have a question about what if you don't have internet? Well, there are solutions to that. Perhaps it's not into every home, but we'd like to make sure it goes to schools, libraries, underserved minority institutions, those sorts of things. So that's just what I meant by democratization is making making the data available to everyone.
That's great. Katy or Manny, would you like to build on that one at all?
I was going to interject that in my
Please.
experience working, for example, with coastal communities, is despite the overwhelming abundance of data, different websites and different archives, most of this oceanic data is really not accessible to the public. And so I think, again, mentioning the artificial intelligence revolution, there's an opportunity here to really use these tools to really combine these different data structures into like an intelligent system that can actually be queried even in natural language by the users to actually have outputs that are both qualitative in nature and also quantitative in nature. And I think that's really a way to really bring a better access to everyone and also enable people to speak different languages as they interact with this oceanic data.
So oh yes, please, Jim.
And just to go along with that, I mean, one problem we really have is nomenclature, is that we don't speak a common language, even when it's something as simple as like sea temperature, like SST is used. And so people go, what is that? So there are a number of things beyond things like a common data format, which is very difficult. Just things like using the same nomenclature is important for people to access the data.
Sounds like we need a new generation of data scientists and data diplomats. I've heard that phrase before as well. Katy, please.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment on the data collection side of things. So my team over the last couple of years has been working on a massive global deep sea capacity assessment. And part of that was a survey. We got survey responses from 124 countries and territories and asked people, do you have in-country tools and technologies? And do you have in-country expertise? And in many places, in fact, we found that people said, yes, they have expertise more than they have the tools. So, so our takeaway from that is like, there are a lot of people out there. There are a lot of people who want to do this, who have, the background and the interest and the skills to be able to do this kind of work, but they just don't have the tools. So I think a large part of this democratization or increasing access to ocean science is just ensuring that people have the tools to be able to do the work that they want to do and have the skills to do. Of course, skills need to be increased in many places as well, but for those that already have them, how can we increase access to that? I also have a question about, I know I'm not supposed to be asking the questions, but this has been a topic of conversation amongst my team, is okay, you get the data online, who then pays for the long-term archive of it? Because like the long-term investment in the data storage and access is potentially a huge barrier to a lot of people. So, you get your NSF grant, your NOAA grant, you make your data available, and then after the 2 years, then what?
That's a great question. Maybe the panel maybe the rest of the panel wants to answer that question. Jim or Manu, any thoughts on that? Who pays for the long term?
I'll let Jim go with this because he does this more often than I do.
After your 30 years of OOI, what happens to all that data?
Right. Well, the point being is that it's a challenge, of course, right? Is that you want to be able to archive this data in such a way that people will always have access to it. The longer you collect data, the more you have to worry about things like cybersecurity. There are things like, you're trying to generate a climate record, and if there's gaps in it for whatever reason, that can screw you up. So yeah, there was a question that we were kicking around about, what are some of the things that big data are lacking? Those are just a few of them. And of course, it does take money to run these, but I don't envision having too many OOI-like observatories but I do envision the OI being part of this collection of observatories around the globe. And I think we're lacking is things like, you know, we do a pretty good job in the Northern Hemisphere and a miserable job in the Southern Hemisphere in terms of collecting data. So I don't know if that's answered the question, but it is something that there are a number of organizations working on these things and trying to make the data affordable to everyone. One thought would be to have an observatory or climate observing summit that brings together this group of people with a focus on data access, for example.
Mhm.
Interesting,
Figured.
interesting. So if we were to open the aperture, make data more accessible, build in some new users, who would be, in your mind, some of those new users, the end users, maybe ones we wouldn't think of right off the top of our head, unconventional, or sort of the future of who is going to care about these data? Who pops to mind for you all?
Just my recent experience, I'll just talk about is, you know, there are a lot of older scientists that are kind of set in their ways. Let's face it, they're used to going to sea on a boat and collecting data for 4 to 6 weeks and hoping they find something interesting. Well, I think this new paradigm is really attractive, I think, to early career scientists and younger people in high school, people in, you know, who are just starting out their careers. They see this as the way forward. I think autonomous vehicles, more versatile satellite measurements, clusters of satellites so that they're cheaper. All of these things that are coming down the pipe right now, I think it's the younger generation that recognizes that this is the future. This is AI. They're not afraid of AI, right? And I will say that AI could not beat my flux parameterization, Manu. We had a bake-off, but nonetheless, it's AI is great for a number of things. For us, by the way, AI is where we're looking first for quality control, QA, QC, trying to remove the person in the loop that you need to work with some of the biogeochemical data that is difficult to maintain, but really crucial for things like CDR, having pH, CO2, those sorts of measurements measured continuously. I think that's a grand challenge that we really need to look at.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Katy, please.
Yeah, I think it's also people in the countries and communities that haven't historically had access to all the amazing tools that people like us have had access to for so long. You know, so many issues in so many countries, deep sea mining, climate impacts, all these things where they, in many cases until now, have relied on outside input, outside expertise from the US, from other countries, and don't have the capabilities themselves to be able to understand and manage and make decisions for themselves. And I think that that is a very, very important group, and a huge group of people and countries all over the world that really need to have access to the tools for their own data collection and the tools for the access to data that exists, to these AI tools, to be able to handle the massive amounts of data that we're going to be seeing in years to come.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to go last.
Go ahead.
Because I share both Jim and Katy's comments. So one thing that I would add is that when we talk about making this data accessible to this new generation of users, it's important to think that the data doesn't come alone, but it comes really with a human infrastructure that can put data into context, being AI-based or not. That's really important. And then the last thing that I could say is I think there's also opportunity for this new wave of ocean data to be used by entrepreneurs, startups, businesses, because if we think of the concept of ocean solutions, right, there's going to be hopefully an economy of ocean solutions that is sustainable, and that economy is going to have to rely on data, new streams of data that is really, focused on advancing those specific economies. So I think we went from the next generation to the underserved to the businesses. But anyway, thank you.
I appreciate that. So let me ask a question that's on the minds of a lot of folks in the ocean and marine sectors, and that is about workforce we're talking about a lot of data, a lot of new users, new approaches, whether it's AI or something else. Is it possible we're going to have too much information and be unable to distill it down and place it into that context that was mentioned? Are we training the right kind of folks, the right skills to come in and take information and turn it into actionable information or insights? How do we do that? And are we preparing that workforce to come on board?
I mean, I could, I'll chime in. What the heck?
I saw a knowing smile on Jim, so I'm going to let him start here.
Well, I mean, part of me is like, there's never too much data. There's always too little data. That's the problem over the ocean, right? It's so data sparse that we struggle with this, which is why, you know, numerical models are so important, particularly as we take our climate models and begin to bring in things like pH and CO2. And so really adding a biogeochemical element to our climate models, because that helps people, you know, in underserved locations too, because if you could have access to the model output, which is what a lot of people work on, is just the climate model output itself, that democratizes the data in another way. I think in terms of too much data, it just means, this is what we found with OOI, is that do not forget about cyber. Cyber infrastructure is so key in start from scratch. You can't be collecting data and then start worrying about how's that data going to be served out to the community. Cyber infrastructure has to be involved from the get-go. And this means that there's going to be opportunities for students to go into data science, more data science. I think we should have a data science department at Woods Hole because it's becoming so important on how we deal with disparate data sets and, you know, big data sets that you're trying to merge with other big data sets. So I think there is a future, and that again is AI is involved with that, but I think it's also people. We need to be training people that know how to handle big data sets and to be working on better and better ways of quality controlling it and providing access.
Awesome, thank you. So I just want to make a quick reminder to the audience, please add your questions into the chat. We do not have a shy panel. We're here for you, so please feel free to add some questions in there. With that, let's stick to this kind of conundrum, is that there's not ever going to be too much data, and yet we want there to be as much data collected and used out of the ocean as possible. I'm going to put you on the spot. If each of you had to limit your top 4 or 5 priority parameters to be collected, what would those be? What are your top go-tos if you can't collect it all?
Visual and CTD.
Oh, she got it down to 2.
Well,
Challenge,
CTD is like 3 in 1. So
yeah, okay.
By visual, do you intend the satellite products, like the collection of satellite products, or
no, like visual of the seabed, video or imagery? Take your pick there.
Yeah, I've been speaking too much. None of you.
Oh no, go Jim. I am just still making my mind.
It's very hard, obviously, to say 4 or 5, right? And people, there are groups of people who have been working on this to define like the essential climate variables, right? And so yeah. I would say, that's the starting place, but in my mind, the critical essential climate variables are those like CO2, pH, methane, things that we really need to validate and improve climate models.
So following on Jim, I also am thinking in this phase of what our planet is going through, the biogeochemical data seems to be emerging to the top of our needs. But of course, we cannot discount all the rest. We need the temperatures, the sea level, and all the other things. But if definitely biogeochemical data would be top on my list right now.
Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to combine all 3 of your short lists because it's very hard to choose. So, and we have a question from the audience that really is a nice jumping off from those answers. The question is about ocean observing networks. The audience member says they're great for understanding current conditions in the ocean, but when we want to try experiments around marine carbon dioxide removal, MCDR, and other ocean solutions, we typically don't want to work near networks that are intended for understanding natural biogeochemistry long term. What would it take to develop and deploy long-term monitoring systems for MCDR tests? It's a great question.
Yeah. Wants to.
The OOI in particular is not designed exclusively for long-term, investigations. In fact, it's meant to allow for process studies and shorter-term investigations as you build up the climate record. I think the issue is not all places are equally, have the same merit as others if your focus is on carbon dioxide removal, for example. But I could see us going to a location where it is appropriate to study carbon dioxide removal. I keep pitching the phytoplankton bloom off of Portugal that we see every year. For example, if you had an OOI like array around that sort of feature, you really could test the science behind some of these CDRs. So that would be my response, is that there may be locations right now where OOI could conduct that sort of investigation, but people would have to look into that. And if it doesn't, there's a way to find a place where you can focus on that.
If I may interject and add a few more comments, I think, when we talk about, for example, this marine CDR and groups or company that are doing pilots and are trying to develop, strategies that are effective, we have to recognize that there's a scale problem, right? Most observational systems, traditional oceanography, yes, we have small scale observation, but, when we think of biogeochemical cycle, like Argo biogeochemical, it's like global and it's very coarse. Whether for some of these pilots, for some of these companies that eventually may do something with ocean CDR, we need something that's very localized and very adaptive. And so really we're thinking, I think, of smart, observing platforms that can actually cross different scales. And I think actually that was one of, what I think is a great selling point of this proposal from Hui for the Ocean Vital Sign Network, is that these platforms need to be designed with the groups that are actually trying to pilot, trying to figure out how to do ocean CDR, for example, if that is ever an option that is going to go forward.
That's great. Thank you for that. Katie, do you want to take a crack at that one?
I'll take a pass on that one. Observatories and CDR, not my wheelhouse. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Here's a curveball for you. What did you wish you had gotten asked? If you can be brief. What did you want to be asked? Katie.
Well, what play? Let me think. Go to somebody else.
Anyone else? Sure. Go.
How do you access OOI data?
You want to answer that question?
I could send the website so people can go straight to it and start downloading data if they want.
Awesome. You want to put that in the chat?
Sure.
All right, Manu, what do you wish someone had asked you?
How to really engage the next generation of not just professionals, but really of individuals. And I'm thinking high school and less, into really exploring the ocean and understanding its beauty, and also start becoming in their mind problem solvers from an early age, because I think we really need that pool of talent to be activated we talk about the older people around like ourselves, but these young people may have ideas early in their careers, not when they hit college or PhD, but even in high school. There's a generation out there that is brilliant, and we should tap into that.
Great. All right, Katie, if you take 20 seconds, I'll take the other 20. Do you have one?
Sounds great. I got one. So about the underobserved, underexplored places in around the world. I've been working with a student in the Marine Biodiversity and Conservation Program at Scripps, and she and another colleague have brought together 50,000 ROV, HOV dives. So we now have a huge database of all of the places, or not all, but many of the places that have been observed. And more than 90% of them have been inside the EEZs of 5 countries. So if you want to ask about what are the places that are currently underobserved, it's like all of the places.
That's great. All
Yes.
right.
So we're really
Katy.
excited
Thank
too.
you. Thank you, Jim, for the link. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time with us. This was really insightful. Thank you to our panelists. I appreciate you. Thank you to the organizers at Woods Hole and to the organizers of Capitol Hill Oceans Week. Everybody enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks all.